Welcome back, beautiful bass fishing people. It's been a couple of weeks since I recorded when I do the two-part episodes. I get a week's break if you want. Grown some winter foliage in the meantime. Getting a bit older there. But welcome back, one and all. This week's episode is one that I have been nervous, that's not the right word, reticent, there's a good word to start the day, reticent to do because it's quite a tricky topic to explain, because I've got my own ideas on it, and like I do with everything else bass fishing, and I kind of have to check those ideas because this whole channel is about learning to fish different techniques. And even though we are getting grounded in the basics of the technique, I feel that it's so easy for this particular technique to just get out there and want to chunk and wind it, that a lot of people will go and try to do that, maybe catch one or two fish or maybe not even get bit, and then never want to try it again, which is really quite sad, because although it can be a tricky technique, once you get it down and once you understand the dynamics of it, it can also be a fairly straightforward technique. So this week's technique is medium running crankbaits. So we did the square balls a while back. Now we're going to do the medium running, and we're probably going to do the deep running crankbaits as well, but this week we're going to do medium running crankbaits. And like the previous episode which we did, this technique is also kind of a system by itself, whereby if you get everything correct to start with, the rest of it is fairly straightforward. So I'm going to tell you how I approach medium running crankbaits. And by medium running crankbaits, we're going to start where the square balls kind of ended off, and we're going to say from 8 to 15 or 16 feet. And although there's a couple of parts to it, if you apply the system, which I suggest, I think you'll find it'll work for you. So let's get into it. Good. This is a technique where you are trying to imitate either a bait fish or in some cases a crawdad. And depending where you live in the world, both of those things can be very effective at certain times of the year. If you are blessed to live where there's no ice, it's a technique you could probably use all year round. So this is one of the few techniques that we discussed where you're going to need a specific rod. And there's a few reasons for that. You're going to need between a 7-foot and an 8-foot medium to medium heavy moderate rod. Our 7-foot medium heavy rod is not going to get the job done for this particular technique. And it's one of the reasons why I've left this technique to kind of, not the end, but nearer to the end of baits, because we start getting into the technique specific rods, although I hate that expression. Casper, that's for you. It's unfortunately something that you cannot get around. And it's also a technique where you're going to want to use a slower reel. So a 5.5 to 1 up to say a 6.2 to 1 reel. This is where that whole argument about just wind slower rears its head. We're not getting into that. My recommendation is a 5.5 to 1 to a 6.2 to 1 reel, and there's reasons for that. Okay. The reason that the rod needs to be a longer rod and a moderate rod, in my opinion, is to get distance. So it's one of those things where the further you can cast the bait, the longer you can keep it in the strike zone, the more chance you have of getting bit. When we go to the close-ups, and we may or may not go to the map today, I haven't made my mind up yet, we'll discuss why that is the case. But for now, that is the case. With this technique of fishing, the whole premise of this technique of fishing is covering water. Covering water and bumping structure and cover. There's no way around that. That's what it is for. So if the system that you have in place, you get in the right areas using the right baits. I'm not saying that you are going to catch fish, but you are going to catch fish. Okay, so we've got the 7 foot to 8 foot, medium to medium heavy rod, moderate. Couple of reasons for that. The most important reason is the reason that we've spoken about in quite a lot of other techniques, is the tearaway. When you fish this type of crankbait, the most common reason that fish would be lost is if your rod was too stiff. That's the long and the short of it. The fish, you're winding the crankbait, you're bumping the cover or structure, the fish hits the bait, and 9 times out of 10, they turn their head and they tear off in a completely different direction. If the rod that you're using is too stiff and the line that you're using is too heavy, that fish is going to pull the hooks, even though they are treble hooks. And although that sounds very difficult to believe now, I promise you that is the case. It is going to happen. That moderate rod, and moderate rods are usually a combination of graphite and some type of glass or e-glass or a softer material. When that fish hits, you don't have to set the hook, because the fish normally turns its head and tears away. That moderate rod just absorbs that shock of that fish hitting and trying to tear away. It's super important that we understand that, guys. If you go out there with your 7 foot medium heavy rod and you catch a little 12-incher on it and you go, this guy's telling me I need to have a specialized rod to do this technique, and you go, it's all crap, and you carry on fishing that way, and then the next time you go out and you belt a big one and it does the same thing, I'm telling you it's going to tear off. It is going to tear off. So why medium and medium heavy? Well, the medium one you would use for the lighter crankbaits of the same genre, and the medium heavy you could go to the slightly heavier ones or the slightly deeper diving ones. You could use a full glass fiberglass cranking rod. I prefer the combination of glass and graphite because it still gives you the feel. I'm not saying you won't have feel with a full glass rod, but the graphite just gives you a little bit extra feel when you're winding the crankbait and it's deflecting off things, etc. That'll become more apparent once we get into this a little bit. Good. Okay. Right. So that's the rod taken care of, the reel taken care of. Spinning rod, guys. That 5.5 to 1 spinning rod is going to be super. The braid on the spinning reel, if you're going to use a braid, it's going to be absolutely fine. You will need to use some type of a leader. Now, there's 2 schools of thought that we're going to go into here as far as the line is concerned. If you're going to go with a moderate rod that's got a lot of forgiveness, you can still use fluorocarbon. I primarily use fluorocarbon for medium running crankbaits. You do not have to use fluorocarbon. If you have maybe a slightly stiffer rod, you can use monofilament. Monofilament has got some stretch to it, so that will kind of help you out a little bit with the rod being not as forgiving. But I want to tell you guys, and you need to remember this, it's a super important detail, monofilament floats. So if you're using the lighter crankbaits, you may not get down to the depth prescribed on that particular crankbait. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. Because fluorocarbon sinks, and it is generally thin diameter line, I find if you use it with the right type of moderate rod, fluorocarbon being a lot more sensitive and a lot less stretch, Remember, we're using the more moderate rod, so the stretch is not quite as important. That fluorocarbon is the way forward. And what thickness or poundage of line would you use? This is going to be directly affected by the type of cover and structure that you're fishing. But as a general rule of thumb, for medium running crankbaits, 10 to 12 pound line. If you're fishing in areas that have very sharp rocks, or maybe a lot of brush where you're going to get stuck and you're aware that you're going to get stuck, you can maybe go up to say a 14 or a 15 pound line. The caveat to that again, guys, is be aware that it may not allow you to get your bait down to the prescribed depth of that bait. Okay. The next tool that we need to have in our box for this specific type of fishing, again, and we've spoken about it before, is some type of lure retriever. Bear in mind, guys, when you're selecting your lure retriever, we are talking about something that can reach from 8 to 15 or 16 foot for this technique. So you do get some telescopic ones which will reach that depth, but my particular favorite for this instance is the one that's on a line. It's got lead weight with 2 rings that you run down the line. They've usually got little chains and things on the back of them to knock the bait free or to catch the hooks on the crankbait so that you can pull them free from the obstruction, or the weight will knock them free from the obstruction. Let's get into the baits. Let's talk about the baits. When we go to the close-up, you're going to see a couple of different things, okay? I'll explain it to you more in the close-ups and what the reasons are for that type of thing. And again, I have my own theories on it, which I'm going to share with you. You take that and you do with that what you want. But that's just grounding knowledge for you to use. We're going to deal with 2 types of crankbait and 2 or 3 types of lips or the bill of the crankbait. So we're going to go with a traditional style round-bodied bait. This will be more apparent when we go to the close-ups. Don't worry about it, guys. And then we're going to go to the flat-sided bait. The 3 types of bill we're going to talk about are going to be the rounded bill crankbait, a coffin-shaped bill on the crankbait, and then something which you can only really describe as kind of an elongated square bill type bill. They're not super common, but you do get them. If I can find one online, I'll put a pic up. All right, good. Let's go to the close-ups. Right, let's get this show on the road. As I mentioned in the opening part of this video, we're going to deal with 2 different body types of medium diving crankbaits and 3 different bill types. Okay, so this is the traditional round-bodied medium running crankbait. You can see the sides of it are rounded, and the bait is vaguely teardrop shaped. And this is a flat-sided. You can see the sides are flat crankbait. The body shape is still the same, but it's flat-sided, and we can talk about that a little bit. See if we can get that to focus nicely. There we go. Okay, so the 3 different bill or diving lip types are the rounded diving lip, a coffin-shaped diving lip, and I forgot, I actually have some of these sort of elongated square bill type lips. So there we go. So let's talk about the general construction, and then we'll get into it a little bit more. Okay, we'll use this one. This one's nice and clear. So this is a copy of a DLN, a Norman Deep Little N. You can see here that there's 2 big ball bearings inside the ABS plastic body. That is to weight the baits, but it's also for noise. And different types of crankbaits have got different size of bearings to make them rattle and make different noise. Some crankbaits don't have ball bearings in them, but they don't rattle at all. So it's ABS body, plastic of some sort. Either this one, like this one, is completely smooth. Some of them have got scale patterns on them, eyes, gills, that type of thing. Same there, same. Everything is the same. 2 spots where hook hangers. That's where your split rings would go with your treble hooks. And then somewhere to tie the line, either with or without a split ring, your personal preference. So they're all made the same. The size of the bulls can be different for different diving depths, different size lures, the shape of the bulls. The size of the bait could be different with the same size lure to make it dive to a different depth. The materials that they're made from, some of the most famous, Rapala and Bagley's, some of their baits are made from balsa. They're not even made out of plastic. So they're made out of wood. The naked body of the bait would look a lot like that before it gets painted. That's wood. That's a shape that I've been messing with and playing around with. That's not balsa, that's basswood. So why round and flat-sided and whatever? And there's going to be a lot of theories on this. The original theory was that you used round-sided baits when the water was warm, and you use flat-sided baits when the water was cold. Why is that? Well, a round-sided bait has got a far wider wiggle. It's kind of more of a wallow and a wiggle, whereas a flat-sided bait is much more like a lipless crankbait. It's a lot tighter wiggle. Even that way, it's a lot tighter. And the theory was that in cold water, the tighter wiggle of the flat-sided bait is what made it more effective in cold water. That may very well be a thing. I like to use flat-bodied crankbaits when the water is warm when I am fishing around pelagic bait fish species. If you take the time to study pelagic or bait fish that live offshore when they swim in a shoal, you will see, if you watch any kind of video of them, that their wiggle is very tight. So that is where the flat-sided bait shines. It's got a very tight wiggle, and to me, that just looks like a pelagic bait fish species. It's my personal opinion. For what that is worth, you guys can take that with a dose of salt. That's what I think. Okay, now back to the system that we started talking about. I'm going to harp on one particular brand of baits here because it just makes it easier, and it may be easier for you when you go out and you're buying your first lot of crankbaits. And that is Rapala. These two baits are copies of DT10s. It's just ones I've painted, yellow perch and a summer bluegill. The Rapala range of DTs, the reason that I recommend it for people that are learning to fish any type of crankbait really, but particularly medium diving crankbaits, DT dives 2, and they have an entire range of crankbaits from a DT4 all the way up to a DT20. When used with 10 to 12 pound fluorocarbon line, that bait will dive to exactly the depth it says on the box. There is no guesswork, absolutely none. I probably use a Rapala DT10 and a DT14 more than any other medium running crankbait. They are my out and out favorites. So much so that I buy in these copies, these plastic copies, and I paint them up myself for the colors that I want them, that Rapala doesn't make. There are obviously regional colors that I like that Rapala may or may not make. But they have a very good range of colors. So I have decided that we'll go to the map today. I'm going to show you why I think that is so important. But before we go to the map, let's just have a look at a couple of different baits. So these two, both there, and most of the DTs in fact are round bills. I don't know if you can get them anymore. You used to get a DT flat, which was a flat-sided crankbait. Actually used to look a lot like that with a coffin-shaped bill. I don't know if they still make them. So there's the round-sided, round-bodied baits. DT10s. This is a copy of a wiggle magwort. There's that extended, but once again, whole different plan. Rounded, extended, square bill shaped bill. So that's a copy of the magwort, wigglewort, magwort. I think they're made by Storm now. I don't even know what this is, but you can see it's a much smaller bait. With a smaller bill, this bait dives to 8 foot. I don't know what the original of this bait was. It may have been a Rebel. So we spoke about the need for a medium moderate rod. That would be the reason to throw baits that size. If you look at that compared to a DT10, and yes, you could throw a DT10 on a medium moderate. But if you looked at those little baits, that'd be pretty difficult to throw on a medium heavy. These ones that I'm showing you now, guys, are all baits that I've painted. Here we have a few flat-sided ones. Just different paint jobs. And then a couple of I showed you this clear DLN guy. Here's a couple of the DLNs that I painted. Just different ideas for colors that you might want to have a look at. Okay, so that is the bait itself. Thousands and thousands and thousands of different kinds of medium running crankbaits. And I promise you guys, you will find your favorite. And that is probably the most fun part about crankbaits. Is going through all the ones you have to go through to find your favorites. It's a lot of fun. Start with the Rapala DT series. Good. Let's get all this nonsense out of the way and go to the map. Okay, as usual, looks like we've run long again. My fault, obviously. I get so excited, I have to get it all out. So we're going to carry on with this next week. Thanks for joining, you guys. We'll see you next time.